WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide, and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Hey folks, welcome to Flashpoint inside the WCNC Charlotte app. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by Julie Kay. This week on Flashpoint, perhaps one of the fastest, most compressed Senate races in U.S. history unfolding in front of us right now in South Carolina.
My goodness, and this is all going to change very quickly. I'll let everyone know we're recording this Friday afternoon, but things could still change by the time it airs Sunday. Goodness, though, filing ends Tuesday, and we're still waiting for some of the big names to make it official.
Yeah.
Senator Darlene Graham, that is what most of our interview with Dr. Scott Huffman focuses on, because that is really the wrench in this that makes it so particularly interesting.
All right, let's take a listen.
All right, we're joined now by Dr. Scott Huffman. Dr. Huffman, thank you for joining us today. Lots going on in South Carolina.
Yeah, usually things are pretty rocky in South Carolina politics anyway, but now more than usual.
Well, so walk me through so far. This is Friday afternoon that we're doing this. We've seen already, I believe, 7 names filed, some that we've heard of, some that are newcomers. What's standing out to you so far?
Well, some of the folks who have decided to jump in, we already knew. I mean, we knew Ralph Norman was going to jump in. We kind of had an idea about Russell Fry once his name was put forward, and Donald Trump seemed to really like Russell Fry. We thought Nancy Mace was going to jump in. She decided not to and has endorsed Ralph Norman. Mark Lynch, who ran against Lindsey Graham, he's in. And now Mark Sanford, our former governor, he's hoping to hike back up the hill to the Capitol building. So we have a whole bunch of people jumping in. The more people that come in, the greater the likelihood of a runoff. And of course, the big question is Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Graham, who decided to jump in. A lot of folks didn't think she would. A lot of folks initially thought she was going to be a placeholder. I did as well until she got sworn in as Darlene Graham instead of Darlene Nordone.
Well, so I want to get back to a lot of the names that you just touched on, specifically Mark Sanford, but Darlene Graham really being the key piece of this here. Tell me about that moment you realized that she might be positioning herself for a run and why that's surprising to a lot of people.
Well, her only experience in politics per se has been sort of campaigning on behalf of her brother. She has, worked in the public sector, never shown signs of wanting to be in the arena herself. You got to think that somebody grabbed her earlobe and started whispering pretty quickly, because she was asked to be, for the appointment almost right after her brother's death. She certainly wasn't thinking about running herself. She was thinking about supporting her brother. But sometime between then and Trump's endorsement of her, somebody got talking to her. Now, she comes in obviously with name recognition, obviously with sympathy. But other candidates have a war chest ready to go. She does not. She can't just take over her brother's. Other candidates have a campaign team ready to go. She does not. Will her brothers step in? Probably. But there's a lot for her to overcome structurally. However, as far as elections go, her competition has a lot to overcome with regard to her being Lindsey Graham's sister and her having a full-throated endorsement by Trump. But we saw in the gubernatorial election, Trump's endorsement isn't necessarily the end-all be-all anymore.
I mean, even just from a structural standpoint, I think she just filed yesterday federally to create her committee. I mean, this is having to come together incredibly fast. But tell me about that balance. We've talked about this before, of President Trump's endorsement. It used to be the end-all be-all. Things seems to have shifted a bit. When you've got a field that's wide, how do you think that's going to play into things?
Well, it was blunted in the gubernatorial race, but there were kind of contextual reasons for that. People suspected that there had been a backroom deal over other things. Whether that's true or not, people suspected it. Also, it was a gubernatorial primary. The governor's office looks towards the state. So this was saying, hey, here's somebody who supports my agenda but is going to run things there. An endorsement in a senatorial race is saying, this is somebody who's going to come help me with my agenda. And since, you have to prove fealty to Trump and the Trump agenda in order to even be considered, the fact that he's saying, get this person to Washington to help me, might give this endorsement a little more weight than his endorsement in the gubernatorial primary. But as you mentioned, his endorsement's not the end-all, be-all anymore. But if it gets to a runoff, could it be the deal breaker if Darlene Graham is in that runoff? It absolutely could, depending on how much more he got involved.
And that kind of plays into late Senator Lindsey Graham's legacy anyway. Of course, he in his own right, prior to President Trump coming into office, had made a legacy for himself, but he did align himself very closely with President Trump towards the end, and so that might be something that helps Darlene Graham as well.
Well, it's going to help Darlene even more than it would have helped Lindsey Graham if Lindsey Graham hadn't already been a friend. The fact is, once Lindsey Graham got back into Trump's good graces, which didn't happen fully until the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, he got inside Trump's inner circle and became a whisperer to Trump about foreign policy. So, in fact, he didn't follow Trump's lead on foreign policy. Trump actually listened a little bit to Lindsey Graham. The thing about Darlene Graham is she has already said in one interview, loyalty to Trump is kind of the main thing. She'll come in and be more of a certain vote for Trump than even Lindsey Graham might have been if, you take what she says at face value. And so, you might be looking at, okay, there's these other folks who have said, I'm going to help push the Trump agenda. But they have shown they have their own ideas. And of course, Mark Sanford showed his desire to not push the Trump agenda, which is why Trump endorsed his primary opponent when he was in Congress and he lost his congressional seat.
And now let's get to some of those other candidates. Of course, Mark Sanford, storied past, as you touched on there. Does it surprise you that he is throwing his name into the ring for this?
No, if you look back at Mark Sanford's history, Mark Sanford sees Mark Sanford as the person who ought to be in a decision-making spot. Again, that's not uncommon. Every politician wakes up one day and says, I need to be in charge, and I think I can convince people to let me. So seeing Mark Sanford jump back in is not a surprise, especially given that he's a youngster compared to modern politicians, compared to Lindsey Graham, especially compared to the president. So his age really isn't a factor, even though he's retirement age by kind of common standards. He has electoral experience. He loves being in the arena. However, he has shown a propensity to go against Trump and to get Trump's ire. So that's going to work against him.
Any other candidates that you are sticking out to you as really solid contenders, or maybe just may garner a lot of support on the journey? I know that Fry and Norman both filing Friday.
Yeah, Lynch, had support going in simply because anybody who wanted to show their displeasure with Lindsey Graham had to vote for Lynch. But we see two really strong, experienced congressional members in Ralph Norman and Russell Fry. They've got a campaign network. They've got a network of donors. Ralph Norman just has this huge war chest that he ran for governor with. He can self-finance. He's got statewide name recognition because he ran for governor. Russell Fry needs to work on that. But again, this isn't so much a statewide race as it is a race focusing on an electorate within an electorate. So it's not just conservatives, it's not just the hardcore Republicans, it's the hardcore, passionate Republicans who are paying attention. Sure, anyone can vote as long as they didn't vote in the Democratic primary, but most people won't. The people who turn out are going to be the most passionate. They're going to be the most informed, and it's the issues that they care about that'll carry the day.
I'm sure to some extent this depends on the candidate themselves. You mentioned that some have different weaknesses, maybe less statewide recognition, but this is all going to happen very, very fast. Filing closes Tuesday. In terms of campaigning with such a short runway, what can we expect to see?
Well, one of the things is the people who have to get statewide name recognition need to do it extremely quickly. The other thing is, in order to stand out from your opponents, especially when everybody except Mark Sanford is claiming the same thing, we just want to push the Trump agenda, you might have to throw some elbows. I've already seen ads, flyers from Lynch trying to go after Ralph Norman. Things are going to get rough, but do you throw elbows at the sister of the late senator, somebody who's still in mourning over her brother? What happens if you start throwing the sharp elbows there? Because in this short time frame, you're gonna have to throw elbows at your opponents, but do you do that with Darlene Graham? And if so, how do you go about it? I think that one of the ways we're seeing Darlene Graham's opponents go after her is talk about her record on abortion, saying that she has not been a full-throated supporter of banning all abortions. So they're finding policy ways to go after her, but I'll be interested to see if any other attacks materialize.
This is going to all come together very fast. I think some of those will develop very quickly over the next couple of weeks. Anything I haven't asked you about that you think is really important to think about when we're looking at this race?
Well, I don't know that the voters need to take this into account, but it's very interesting that this election is technically illegal. We're breaking federal law by the way we do it. There is a law that says, military members who are overseas, people living overseas, that everything has to happen within a certain window. And because of the filing period, the elections, which are mandated by our South Carolina law, we're going to end up violating federal law. Now, there has been an agreement reached between our election commission and the Department of Justice to go ahead with this. But it's really interesting that we are technically holding a federally illegal election.
That certainly adds quite a few layers to this whole situation. Dr. Huffman, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm sure we'll see you soon. Lots going on in South Carolina. We always appreciate your input.
I'm always happy to be with you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. More Flashpoint after this.
Welcome back to Flashpoint here inside the WCNC app. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by Julie Kay. If you're just now joining us, we're talking about the South Carolina Senate race. We had Scott Huffman on just a few moments ago, sort of breaking down the race. Now we want to show you an interview we did this past week with Ralph Norman, congressman, longtime congressman, of course, from Rock Hill. First ran for governor this year, didn't quite make it, decided to run for Senate this time around. Certainly has some of the name recognition, but is it going to be enough for him? We chatted with him this past week during our morning streaming show. He had a few interesting things to say. Take a listen. South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman launching a bid for the U.S. Senate seat left open after the sudden death of Lindsey Graham.
Today, we're talking with Congressman Norman about his campaign, his priorities, and why he believes that he is the right choice and the best choice for South Carolina voters. Thanks so much for getting up early and joining us, Congressman. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
My pleasure. Glad to be with you.
Certainly. Now, you're running for the U.S. seat that was previously held by Senator Lindsey Graham. What made you decide that now is the right time for you to make this move?
Well, I tell you, it was unexpected, not just for me, but for everyone. All across the state, people were upset, as I was and others, that Lindsey Graham is no longer with us because he was a fixture. That being said, when it became open, I've been concerned while I've been in the House that we can pass perfectly good legislation, and the Senate is where everything dies. And I just decided, out of everybody in this race, I've got the most proven conservative record, and it's needed now more than ever in the United States Senate. And I'll be a voice for conservatism. There's no guesswork with Ralph Norman. People know where we stand, and we want to take that and make something happen, particularly on this securing our elections, this Save America Act, and that's top and foremost in my mind. And you got to nuke the filibuster to do that.
To that point, all that said, You did not get the president's endorsement, and I know you sought it. Let me ask you this, though. Does that endorsement carry the same weight that it once did?
Yeah, I asked, who does not want President Trump's endorsement? That's why I asked for it. He selected another person, which is fine. I'll let the people in South Carolina decide that, and they're going to choose the next senator. And so, it's it's an endorsement we would have liked, but it doesn't stop me, and it doesn't stop me for filing. And it's a competitive race, and I think we will have others that will join this race that will have to prove where they are and what they believe in, and I think all that's good. Let's give South Carolina a choice.
And so this is a tight window that we're talking about. There's the endorsement, there is name recognition, and there have also been some calls for a public debate. So everyone in South Carolina knows who these candidates are. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I love debates. I think we've had one on the books for August 4th, but it is a short time that we're dealing with. But there's not anything you can do about that. But I love debates. I love the campaigning. This is a different race because of, we've basically got 2 weeks left. But I'm excited about it. I think that we've got a tremendous opportunity, and it's an important decision because the two senators that represent South Carolina, and I want to be one of the two.
Yeah, you just lost a statewide race just about a month or so ago, the race for governor. What makes you think you can have a different outcome in this statewide race? Well,
again, it's two separate races. My name ID is 85%. My favorables are double digits. I've got the endorsement of two of the most conservative senators in the U.S. Senate, which Rick Scott and Mike Lee. Jim DeMint is coming out for me this morning. Mark Meadows will be with me. All that being said, we're a red conservative state, and I will represent the state in that fashion, and just look forward to it. And it's a competitive race, and that's the way it should be.
And so, Congressman, again, this would be to cover all of South Carolina. Obviously, you're very well known in your district. For people who are in South Carolina, not in your district, what is your message to them? When they're going through the list of candidates, they're like, how do I decide who I'd like to represent me? What is your specific message to them?
My specific message is that Ralph Norman has a proven track record. Club for Growth, Heritage Foundation, Turning Point USA, all of the ones I check the box for conservatism. And my message is the America First agenda, which is very simple. It's putting our military first. It is making sure we are secure. It is making sure our elections are secure. It's making sure the people are represented. And we have a lot of people coming to South Carolina. I want to represent it, and I want to protect it because we've got a special state that's got a special culture. And again, with me, you know what you're getting, and I look forward to, over the next 2 weeks, putting it out to the American people, to the South Carolinians and to the American people.
You bring up your conservative credentials, no doubt a big deal in a state that's so red like South Carolina. Do you feel like Darlene Graham has proven herself to be a conservative?
Well, one, we were at a prayer breakfast with Darlene yesterday, and I told her she had tremendous courage to do what she's doing. And that being said, people are going to have to know where she stands on issues. Where do you stand on abortion? Where do you stand on spending? Where do you stand on aid we give to other countries? All that will be fleshed out during the debate, and that's the value of that. So I look forward to hearing reviews. I don't know. I don't think she's ever held office, but that's not a bad thing. She'll explain where she is on the events that she's going to be voting on, should she be elected and should she go to the United States Senate.
So, Congressman, let me ask you this, because you said earlier that, some bills are passed in the House and the Senate is where they go to die. So there has to be the ability to reach across the aisle to find some common ground to get some of these bills passed. Do you think, if elected, you will be able to do that, to work with members of the opposing party?
Well, what's happening now is the Democrat Party is a socialist party. It just is. I mean, you see it all over the country, Michigan, in other states, New York, California, Virginia now. I'll reach across the aisle and talk, but at the center of this is passing conservative legislation, and I bring back the the Save America Act, which is very simple, is showing who, if you're an American citizen, and it's showing the photo ID that you are who you say you are. That's very simple. Now, if you have to negotiate that, I'll draw a red line on a lot of things, because I'm not going to pass something that gives it to you in the name, but then just takes it away. And that's what the Senate, in a lot of cases, have done. But let's have the debate on every line item of bills that we pass. But see, the Senate's not even taking it up. That's where I think it's wrong. It's wrong for the country. We don't have the runway for liberal ideas. We're $40 trillion in debt. Our interest now on our national debt exceeds our total military budget. So all that being said, we're at a critical time, and I fit the bill for bringing conservatism.
Let me ask you a direct question. You are a straight shooter, so I think you'll appreciate it, and I think you'll understand where it's coming from. There's a lot of talk. Age is a big issue on Capitol Hill. Mitch McConnell is MIA right now, and it's hardly a Republican issue. Democrats are equally to blame on this. And it seems like some lawmakers are intent on holding on to these offices to their last dying breath, if I'm being blunt. I believe you are in your early 70s. If you won this, you would be around 80 at the end of your term. Would you pledge to the voters of South Carolina that you would seek only one term in office? Because the second term, you would be 86-ish?
Look, it's funny, the people that are bringing up age, I guess they think people are too old to vote if you pass a certain age. Look, Donald Trump is now 80, I think, and he'll be 82, 83. And it's what it's what your core principles are. It's what your record is, regardless of the age. Now, I think cognitive tests are probably on some of these senators needed to be addressed, and I welcome something like that. But I'm 73. I'll be 79 at the end of this term. So it's really laughable that they're bringing that up, because, and they can continue to do it, but it's what your core value is, what you represent, and even more important, what's your track record? And I've got the track record that shows that I work, I study the issues, and I vote right on them, particularly for South Carolina.
All right, Congressman Ralph Norman, wanting to be South Carolina's next U.S. Senator. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Go to ralphnormanforsenate.com.
There you go. Congressman, thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. There's some of our interview with Ralph Norman from earlier this week there inside the WCNC Charlotte morning show. Interesting that he wouldn't really criticize Darlene Graham. That was interesting. And he wouldn't criticize the president either, which I gave him an opportunity to both, and he did not jump on those things. Of course, Ralph Norman is a seasoned politician. He's been around for a long time.
Not his first rodeo.
Not his first rodeo. So he knows how to navigate those waters. By the way, we should also say we put in requests for the other candidates too. So we were waiting to hear back.
Not surprising he got back though, given from our area too.
Yes.
I do think that's so interesting that you mentioned that, because that's exactly what Huffman said, is a lot of these candidates are probably not going to want to criticize Darlene Graham, even though with the endorsement of President Trump, that might put her in a front runner position. Of course, it may not be, as we talked about, end all be all, but it really puts her at the forefront of this
I asked him that. I said, the weight of the Trump, sort of endorsement doesn't weigh as heavily as it once did, does it? And he didn't bite. He could have easily discredited the endorsement and said, yeah, that's right, it doesn't matter. But he wouldn't, because, I think eventually he would like to still stay in the president's good graces and the good graces of the entire MAGA movement.
It opens a can of worms you probably don't want to touch at the beginning of a very short runway.
Exactly. As for what we learned in this episode, also part of that interview, I thought people laughed at my last question with him about his age.
I did laugh.
Everybody did. I had friends who texted me about that. But seriously, though, that is an important question, because as I said to the congressman, whether you look at Mitch McConnell or you look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg before she died, you've got, this is a bipartisan thing of you've got some older lawmakers who just hold on to power no matter what. And I think there are questions you have to ask. There are questions you've got to ask. And so, as you could tell, he didn't take the bait about keeping it to one term. He'll be almost 80 at the end of that one term. If he goes for a second term, that would put him at 86.
Right.
So he didn't seem to think it was a serious issue.
You know, though, when you put yourself in a position to run for public office, especially at that scale, those are the questions that, especially
Yes.
now, I mean, completely appropriate to ask, as you should, because
Yes.
this is a recurring thing that we're seeing on either side of the
Yeah,
aisle.
to that point, I'm glad you said that, because the Congressman, I thought, was a good sport about it.
Yeah.
But if you have a politician that you really like, that bristles at questions, or doesn't like questions, or shoot them down, that should be a warning flag. Just because you as a voter, we as voting public, are instilling with them a lot of power. We should criticize them as much as possible and ask them as many questions as possible, because like they are working on our behalf, and I genuinely mean that. Whether you're the staunchest Republican or the most wild-eyed liberal, bristle if your politician bristles at tough questions, because they're the person in the ring. They've got to be able to take it, and if they don't. But he was a good sport about it.
He absolutely was.
He was a
But
good sport.
We talk all day about transparency, and it's something that you and I deal with just
Yeah.
on the regular because of our job,
Yeah.
but these people represent all of us, and that's a very good point.
I also realize that. Sorry, this has just been pontificating
No, I'm
now.
loving this.
No.
No.
That I think that is something that's lost on people. In the last 20 years, cable networks have started airing the White House briefings,
Yep.
which I think is good. I think it's important. I don't think it serves us well, because it shows journalists being kind of bullies. And that's a side of us that we've sort of curated and not shown to the public.
Yeah.
Listen, I think it's important. I think, you get those White House correspondents in there, and I don't care what anybody says, they will go after whoever is in office.
Yes.
Like a dog on a bone. And they take that responsibility very seriously. And so the downside of that is it's not a nice, pretty, wrapped up version of a journalist that you see, but it's an important part of what we do. And while I think has its downsides, I also think it's a good reminder of folks, like, that's kind of our job, is to
You
ask
and
those
I have
questions.
talked about that too. Just, when I'm out there talking to people,
Yeah.
the balance of you want to be as kind and respectful as possible, but it is my job to push sometimes.
Totally.
And it's an uncomfortable balance, but it's both a pro and a con that like people are able to see. And that's why I kind of do like these streaming moments too, where we can be more
I
honest
think,
and we can have these full interviews air.
I think the politicians who understand and respect what we do,
Yeah.
and the media, despite our flaws, and there are many,
Yes.
get that, and get that you have to ask that question. And I'm always so impressed with the member of Congress or even city council who'll be like, what, that was a good question, or I appreciate that. Even if it's tough.
a mutual respect thing.
Because they understand why it's important that not only we ask it, but they get the opportunity to address it.
If I'm going to write a story about it, I owe you the respect of asking you to your face.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. So we learned a lot, I guess.
We learned a lot about
There you go.
ourselves, about anything else that you learned from, this is going to be a really interesting
Yeah, how about you?
pilot. I didn't know about the drama between the federal and the state election in general. That's a small tidbit,
Yeah.
but it was really interesting to hear about because I didn't know that discussion was happening behind the scenes. And of course, they've come to an agreement, but I wonder if that's going to be a problem just going forward, that they'll have to.
Could it be the source of a lawsuit later or something?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm watching out for. But I do think it's going to be an interesting test of how far does President Trump's endorsement go? We're seeing the same question being asked yesterday I was
Yeah.
at both North Carolina U.S. Senate events. Both Whatley and Cooper were in Gastonia.
Yeah.
And both of them were asked a question by other reporters about, Whatley, aligning yourself with Trump, is that a bad
Yeah.
thing for you? And so we're seeing this not just in South Carolina, but other places too. It's going to be a question that comes up.
Yeah. All right, folks. That's going to have to do it for this week's edition of Flashpoint. We hope to see you back here next week.